Hey folks! Well, in this video, I just want to introduce a few of the ideas of version control in general. So some of the overall principles and some pretty common features to version control systems. And then what we'll do in the next few videos, the next few sessions, is to go through and start looking at Git in particular and the Git version of how we use all these different features. So should be pretty short this time around. The idea is for any good sized project, we typically have a ton of different files to track. Aside from the actual code files that we've got, so we might have a ton of header files and a ton of .cpp files or whatever it is, whatever language it is we're playing with, a ton of different code files to track, but you're also going to have configuration files, you're also going to have data files, you're also going to have documentation files, and all sorts of bits and pieces that we need to keep track of. It's entirely possible that whatever your project is, you're maintaining it for a whole bunch of different platforms, and you might be maintaining it for a whole bunch of different versions, right? We've got version 1 and version 2 and version 3.5 and whatever it might be, and we've got different clients that have different versions installed, and we're trying to maintain all of them, or at least some of the more recent ones. And again, we're trying to support these things on a bunch of different platforms, which might require different versions of the files and different settings and whatnot. So there might be a ton of different versions of different files, and we're trying to keep track of all of these so that if somebody comes in and says, oh, there's a bug in the Android build for version 3.1, we can figure out the right version of the right files to go through and edit. And then once we've fixed them and hopefully tested them and put them into production, if we need to later on, we can get back to those. So the other thing you want to be able to do is, as you're going through and writing your code and modifying your code, you're going to have cases where you come up with fixes for different bugs or different features that you add, different improvements that you make. And there's going to be times when these are good, times when they're bad, times when you want to be able to try one of these things out without breaking the real version of the code if you like. And so again, all of these things create different versions of the code or of the files that you need to be able to keep track of. And this notion of version control is just this overall idea that somehow we would like to automate the process of keeping track of this. Right? You can do it manually, but especially if you're dealing with a group of people, that gets really tricky. There's lots of different versions, lots of different forms of version control out there, lots of different systems at lots of different price points. We're going to use Git. It's open source and free, and that makes it suitable for a university environment. And again, it's fairly widely used. Now, we're going to be working with this from the command line in Linux, right, to kind of suit the things that we're doing for the rest of this, and so that we can start scripting some of the techniques that we use here and some of the commands that we use. So this will be a little bit different than some of the GUI versions of Git that you might run across in GitLab or whatever it might be. So this is the idea of what we're going to be playing with. Now, there are a few things that are pretty typical in version control systems. You might want to essentially start a new project, a new collection of files that you want to maintain under version control. So we've got something new, and we want to keep track of everything related to this new project. You want to be able to add files to this. You want to be able to delete or remove files from it. You want to be able to change and rename and move files around in it. So the version control system has to support doing all of those things. And you probably want to be able to do things like say, okay, I want to remember the way it looks right now. This is my version 3.2 of the code, or whatever it might be. So you might want to be able to create sort of a snapshot or a checkpoint that says, for day 1 of version 3.2, this is what it looked like. So if I ever need to get back to this point, I can see what all the files look like at that particular point in time. And then you want some way to go through all of the snapshots that you've taken, so you can say, okay, I want what the files look like for version 3.2, or I want what the files looked like on March 1st, or I want to see the history of changes made to some particular file, or the changes that were made on some particular date, or be able to look at what's different between the snapshot that we had on May 1st and the snapshot that we had on July 2nd, so you can see what's changed between those two times. And you want to be able to control and coordinate access to all of these things across multiple programmers. Right? If you've got lots of different people that are coming in and editing these files, we want to make sure that, I don't trash the file that you're also editing right at this particular moment. So there's lots of different things that the version control systems are trying to do for us. The other thing we want to take a look at are the concepts of branching and merging. So there are going to be times when you want to create, if you like, a new offshoot of your project. Again, let's say that originally we developed whatever our whiz-bang product is, originally we developed it for Linux. And now I want to make a port of it to Mac, or a port of it for Windows, or I want to create a new version. So I've created version 1, I want to create version 2, but I still want to be able to work on the code base for version 1. Or I want to be able to add an optional new fancy graphical user interface. So what we're going to do is say, okay, let's take the code that we have now and create a separate branch of it, where initially they're going to look exactly alike. We've got our vanilla version and we've got our fancy other version. And so we can go through this idea of creating branches, a new copy of what the code looks like right now. And from that point on, we can work in the two branches separately. We can change the code in one that has nothing to do with the code in the other anymore. And as we choose, we can switch back and forth and work in one branch, or switch over and work in the other one. And eventually it might get to the point where we decide, you know what, I had my my vanilla version and I had my fancy GUI version of my my product, and now I'd like to merge them into a single branch and just use the GUI version. So this is something else that we'll want to be able to do, is to take all of the data in one branch and all of the data from another branch and somehow merge them together into a single functional unit again. So these are some of the ideas that we'll play with as we look at version control. And again, for our purposes, the system that we're going to use is Git, but this same kind of idea is supported in a lot of different version control systems. All right, we'll pick it up talking about Git next time around.